You can follow me there. And welcome to the first edition of WeShow EPL, where we'll preview the 2021-2022 season. Thank you very much for everybody who's joining us. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You are watching this on the WeShow Football YouTube channel right now. So I have my co-host for today. I don't know if you want to call him a co-host. He's my guest, David Gerges. So go ahead and bring him in now. Hey, David, how are you?
Hi, Jess. How are you?
I'm good. I can't complain. So, we're going to kind of do some predictions on the upcoming season. But I think before we do that, we kind of want to do a recap of what happened last season and starting out with your team, Liverpool, and the injury crisis that they went through. Do you want to just kind of do a rundown of that? And what do you think about, the players being able to come back from those injuries? Do you think they'll come back stronger, or do you still think there's some issues there?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a very difficult season for Liverpool, and they've managed to salvage it in the end by finishing third and getting a Champions League place, which ultimately was the best they could hope for. Really having that injury crisis that just ravaged through the entire defense. If you think they lost Van Dijk in September, Joe Gomez not that far afterwards, and Matip as well was then ruled out for the season. And yeah, it was a really difficult time for Liverpool. But I mean, they did awfully well. If you remember, they were top on Christmas Day. They'd just beaten Crystal Palace 7-0, were top of the league. But I think it eventually caught up with them, and they went on that horrible run immediately afterwards and lost a number of games in a row at Anfield. And if you think in the seasons before, in the season that they won the league and the year before that, they'd only lost 2 games in total. To then lose, 4 or 5 on the bounce at Anfield was just, it was a complete collapse, and it eventually caught up with them. So I think, yeah, ultimately they did the best that they could by finishing third, as we can see there. And I think for them, crucially this season, it looks like Van Dijk and Gomez have had a good pre-season under their belts, but what they'll look like is another thing altogether. I think if Klopp can get the players back that were there before they got those injuries, then I think Liverpool will definitely be challenging again, because we saw how good that defensive unit is. But those injuries are very, very tough to come back from. And when you think with someone like Joe Gomez, who's had 3 serious injuries now, it's going to be a real test for how Klopp manages those two week in, week out, really.
How did it feel like seeing Joe Gomez and Virgil van Dijk like run out onto the pitch like after such long-term injuries? I'm sure it was like a sigh of relief for Liverpool fans, wasn't it?
Yeah, and the other thing is, I mean, they'd obviously been working together, doing their rehab together, and it was fitting almost that they both came on at the same time, a brief cameo for 20 minutes, and since then they've been building on their fitness. Van Dijk played, I think, 70 odd minutes in the game against Bilbao a couple of days ago, and Gomez on Monday played just as many minutes against Osasuna. So I mean, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Klopp does against Norwich on Saturday evening. Does he start both? Does he start neither? And how he works them back into the groove, really.
Yeah. So, I mean, Liverpool was not able to retain their title, obviously, last season, but Manchester City was the team that came out on top after a really bad start. At one point they were like 15th. So let's talk a little bit about Manchester City. And they won the Premier League. They brought in Jack Grealish. Do they have enough to kind of kick on, and how did you see their season last season? Did you see it as kind of like an anomaly because of how weird it was, or were they really the best team?
I think they really were the best team, and they really deserved to win the Premier League. And when you think they also got to the Champions League final, it was a very impressive feat from Guardiola's side. Ultimately, they lost that final to Chelsea. But yeah, City were by far the better team, the best team last season, and they're my favourites to defend their crown this season.
Nice. So we're going to do things a little bit out of order, because we're kind of talking about Manchester City, so we can just kind of roll on with it and then talk about Lukaku in a minute. But let's talk about Grealish. I think it's so interesting that for Manchester City, a lot of people have said like they needed to bring in a center forward. Like that's what was missing in that team, especially with Aguero leaving and Gabriel Jesus kind of being somebody that misses quite a few chances. But they spent the money on Grealish, who's one of the best players in the league, one of the top players. Like I don't think anybody can dispute that. But for 100 million, for you, does he move the needle to a point where you would say, without a shadow of a doubt, they win the Premier League with Jack Grealish in their side, and maybe Champions League, which is kind of like that elusive title that they haven't been able to attain?
Well, I think it was interesting the way Jack Grealish spoke after his unveiling, talking about the way Guardiola sees him as not only a number 10, but also a number 8. He can also play a false 9 position as well as being a out and out winger. And I'm just not so sure, to be honest. I don't know if Grealish would be best served playing in a false 9 position. I mean, last season we saw Guardiola use Sterling there. He used De Bruyne there. He used Bernardo Silva there. Jesus, obviously, as you said, can play there as well. But I think for me, it's a great signing. He's a wonderful player, but I just think there was more of an urgency for me for City to get a centre forward. And you mentioned Aguero, though, someone who, as soon as he gets the ball in the box, it's virtually going to be a goal. And I just don't feel that City have that player inside the penalty area that can, get you 25 goals a season. So I think, I still think there's a bit to run on this Harry Kane saga, and I can't see him. I can't see him being happy if they stop him from going to the Champions, a team that have just spent 100 million on one of his England teammates in Jack Grealish, De Bruyne. There's a host of players that Harry Kane would love to play with at City. So I think there's still a bit to go with that one.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, there's very concrete, reports coming out now that Manchester City is not done. They're convinced that they can get this deal done. It's just about convincing Levy to take the deal. He's a difficult negotiator, I would say, so I don't think it'll be easy, but they're looking to spend about 150 million on Harry Kane. And they definitely have that power, which is just, it's one of those things, like, especially, I mean, you're a Liverpool fan and I'm an Arsenal fan, it's not like we don't spend, but we definitely can't spend that, So
You've given it away, Jess.
I mean, it's interesting. But somebody like another title challenger, I think we can say with certainty, is Chelsea. And I mean, I don't know if it's announced yet. I'm sure it'll be sometime soon. Lukaku to Chelsea, confirmed. After the Haaland rumors, is this the next best choice for Chelsea for a center forward position?
I think so. There's a bit of romanticism in this story as well. He's a Chelsea supporter. He's spoken of that in the past, and there's that wonderful video of him as a kid going on a Chelsea tour at Stamford Bridge and just, soaking it in and saying that he'd love to play here one day. And, it was very underwhelming his first stint at Chelsea, and then has obviously got the move, then moved to Man United, and that seemed to start well under Mourinho, and then just kind of, Lukaku didn't really kick on. What I've got to say is the player that Chelsea are inheriting now is a very different player. He's gone to Inter Milan. I think Conte deserves a lot of praise for the Lukaku that Chelsea are signing now. There's a reason that they're going to pay 98 million for him. He's an excellent striker. He can play in that role on his own. I think he'll be very good for someone like Timo Werner, who I think has struggled to play that role for Chelsea. But I think someone like Lukaku and his link-up play with Lautaro Martinez at Inter, I think he can bring a bit more out of Timo Werner. And then you think the players behind him, the likes of Kai Havertz, Mason Mount, Hakim Ziyech, Chelsea have a lot of creative players, and I mean that's only going to be, music to Lukaku's ears, if we're being honest.
Yeah, for sure. I think they're creative players and like Havertz and Ziyech, like you said, Reece James, even Chilwell, great delivers of the ball. They need a focal point, don't they? Just somebody to know that is going to be in the box so that they can make something out of those chances that they've created. I think they had like 65 or 60, like 66 or 65 expected goals, and they only scored 54. So I mean, right there, that's the difference really between maybe winning the Premier League or not. So if you have Lukaku there, who's quite clinical. I think he's a clinical striker. Sometimes, I think he's improved. Sometimes he doesn't pass my eye test, but who am I? But definitely clinical, and I think makes a huge difference for Chelsea moving forward. Another team that's doing quite well in terms of you know, their transfers and being able to plug holes in their team is Manchester United. And they were able to bring in Sancho, which is basically a two window deal at this point. Like last season, he was supposed to come in and he didn't, but they were able to get him now for less. So from a Manchester United perspective, you might see that as a good, or maybe not having him a season prior, maybe a negative. Either way, you have him, one of the best young creative players in the world. You can't really say anything different. And then Varane, I think that's a little bit more mixed depending on who you ask, but still, you're replacing Lindelof with Varane. So what's not to love about that? What have you made of Manchester United's, transfer window? It's got to be seen as successful, right?
Absolutely. I think they've had a good window so far. What I would say is I still believe that United are one, if not two players short. And for me, both of those really are central midfield. If you think about City's strength there with, De Bruyne, Rodri, Gundogan, Bernardo Silva plays in there, Phil Foden can play there, Jack Grealish can play there. If you look at Chelsea with the likes of Kovacic, Kante, Jorginho, these are world-class players. And for United, it doesn't really have the same ring when you think about Matic, McTominay, and Fred. And that's no disrespect to those players, but I just think I think United will blow a lot of teams away with Sancho there now. He creates so many chances. You've only got to ask Erling Haaland about the amount of goals that he lays up for him. So I think Sancho will really improve United's attack and really, offer Cavani and Greenwood a lot of chance and create a lot of chances for those two, as well as Bruno Fernandes. But it's those central midfield positions where I think in the big games against the big teams, against the likes of City and Chelsea and even Liverpool, where I think Man United could struggle really unless they play counter-attack football and basically bypass their midfield. So it'd be interesting to see if United go with those players or try and get a central midfielder, because I still think they are one player short. But reflecting on the two that they have signed, Sancho I think is a wonderful player, and Rafael Varane has won everything in the game. He's won absolutely everything: the World Cup, the Euros, countless Champions League titles with Real when they won the three in a row. He's won, La Liga a few times. An excellent player. Harry Maguire has been, rejuvenated over the summer. Luke Shaw as well with England. We saw those two. So he's really going to improve Man United's back four. There's no question about that. It's just those players in front and how they screen and protect the back four that's going to be, for me, the question that we'll see when the season starts, how Manchester United deal with that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that is a good window, but at the same time, when I see that they're heavily linked to even right backs like Trippier, I kind of think like, is that really where you need to be spending your
Mm.
money instead of midfield? 35 million for Kieran Trippier, 35 million to a midfielder could make a lot of difference. But I also think them not moving on a midfielder has a lot to do with Paul Pogba looking like he's going to stay. So, I mean, you do have world-class talent in your midfield and like Bruno and Pogba, but it's unbalanced, so that might cost them a couple points, but nevertheless, that's a very, very strong Manchester United team that I think is going to make a push for the title. May come up short, but I definitely think they'll be good this season. We already kind of spoke about Liverpool and Van Dijk and Joe Gomez in particular, but I did want to ask a little bit about the lack of like transfers in terms of like midfield and up front, which seems to be like heavy on the Liverpool fans' minds in terms of like, have we improved enough? From your perspective, are you expecting somebody to come in, and what needs to happen for you guys to really make a push? Because you'll get your players back, and they'll probably do well, but you can't say that maybe the front three is not a little bit stale. That's kind of like my perspective on it. Don't hate
Yeah.
me.
No. I think you're right. I think for Liverpool to have the season that they want to have and to challenge for the title, it's certainly they're going to want, better luck with injuries. They can't really afford to lose players again. But also, I think it's been a good summer for two of that front three in Salah and Mane. They haven't had a competition to play in. They've had a real time to relax and reset. Salah did well, if we're being honest. I think Mane was the one. Mane and Firmino, very disappointing. And Firmino obviously then went and played in the Copa America with Brazil. But Mane's had a real rest and has looked much like the player we expect Sadio Mane to play in pre-season so far. I don't like reading too much into pre-season, but it's that rhythm that he has shown and that sharpness that I think Klopp will be very confident about getting the Mane back that we saw 2 seasons ago when he shared the golden boot with Salah. So I think for Liverpool, the frustration about not signing players has been there, but if you think about that squad, it's already quite a strong squad as it is. And you've got, we've talked about Gomez and Van Dijk being back. They've signed Ibrahima Konate, who I think is a wonderful prospect and a great player, and someone who has that pace to fill in at centre half if they have any problems. You get Thiago, who's now had a bit more time to bed in. He obviously missed a bit of the season through injury as well. For Liverpool to sign a player, I think they've got to shift a bit of deadwood that's still there in the squad. I believe Shaqiri might be on his way out soon to Lyon. I think Divock Origi's time at Liverpool has come and gone. I think they're trying to get rid of him. And I think if they get rid of those two and possibly one other, they might go out and buy somebody. But again, you think Liverpool have got some decent options there, players that some have been somewhat underwhelming in the past, but have had good pre-seasons. And I think that might be something that Jurgen Klopp is quietly confident that they can kind of build on that. The likes of Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, Takumi Minamino's had a great pre-season with Liverpool as well after his loan spell at Southampton in the second half of last season. So I think Klopp would like somebody, because I think you always do need to buy somebody to keep players on their toes and to keep that competitive spirit going in the squad. But if he doesn't, I think they're probably saving themselves for next summer, when it will probably be a big transfer window for them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's not like Liverpool's still not a really good squad. It's just the level of competition and the way other teams are spending at the moment is making it almost unattainable in some ways, so but I still think Liverpool, for me, the team I least like playing against is Liverpool, like more than Man City, more than Manchester United, because it just, you guys could be
They're
scary on your
relentless.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the way that you guys play. Like, it's just difficult to see you even being competitive in those matches. But let's do some predictions now. This is where it gets fun. So we're going to be predicting the champions, the top 4, and the bottom 3. And I think Tom, our producer, is going to put up our tables, I think. So
will we get them side by side?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
This is mine, I believe.
Yes.
So I'll go with mine first. And I guess we'll just go through the whole thing so we can just pull up our predictions one at a time. But I have Chelsea to win the Premier League. I just feel I think Man City is a great. First of all, when I'm saying 1, 2, and 3, I'm saying like this is going to be barely. I think it's going to be way closer than it's been. Last season it wasn't close at all. With Chelsea, I just think there's less pressure on them to defend the Champions League. There's less pressure on them to do that than for Man City to win the Champions League. I think they have to this season. And I think when you're in multiple competitions that are quite difficult, you tend to take your eye off the ball. And I do think Chelsea will power on through this season. I don't see very many weaknesses in their squad. If they're able to acquire Koundé as well, I think they will have addressed center back, which was the other, position that I thought that they had some issues besides center forward. I think Lukaku comes straight in, scores a bunch of goals. They also don't give up goals, which, that's important as well. And for me, when you start talking about who's going to win the Premier League, I think it's about where the wind is blowing. It's not always about who's the best team. I just think when you have momentum, you kind of roll with it. And that's kind of how I felt when Liverpool won the title, even though there was a really good Manchester City side there as well. I just think it was their time, and it feels like it's Chelsea's time. They're just winning everything at the moment, and I think Tuchel is a really good manager. So I have them number one. The reason why I have, Manchester United as number two is because I find them to be a really good Premier League team. Like, I just think they know, like, Ole Gunnar, he may not be good in cup competitions. I think that's where he struggles because you have to make harder decisions. He knows copy and paste, starting 11. If it gets rocky, throw more attackers on and just overwhelm teams. When we play against the big teams, play counterattack football, get a tie and get out. And I think that's the perfect formula for an even better Manchester United team to push even further. And they also don't have pressure to win the Champions League as Man City do. Man City, to me, at the moment, although such a good squad, I think they're a little stale. I just think they need to, I don't think they've shaken it up enough. And I think they'll not struggle, but I think they'll fall behind just a little bit. And sorry, I don't think Liverpool makes the top four. And the reason why is just because recovering from injuries is not linear. And when I look at the Liverpool squad, I'm thinking all of them are pretty much recovering from an injury. And I feel because there hasn't been enough acquisitions in the transfer window, a couple of key injuries, a reoccurring injuries to key players, a Jordan Henderson, a Fabinho, a Virgil van Dijk, even now Robertson has a couple of weeks out, I think will throw off the team and maybe they'll just miss it. And I think it's third time's a charm for Leicester. I think they get it this time. I think the team that they're building is the future. Like that power and pace way that they're going to play is going to be very difficult to defend against. And I just think Brendan Rodgers is going to get it right this time. So those are my kind of like top. And if we kind of want to talk about the bottom three, I believe Watford is certain to go down, in my opinion. Even though I think they have Josh King and Ismail Sarr, I just don't see that being enough. And usually for those teams, scoring goals is an issue. I think they will struggle. Norwich, again, another team that I believe Todd Cantwell will leave. And then bringing in Josh Sargent is not going to give you the goals required. You've already lost Buendia. I think they're certain to go down. And I have kind of like a left option in Southampton. The way they're moving for me is almost like when an NBA team wants to get like the draft picks, they kind of tank their team so that they can get the highest draft picks. That's what it feels like they're doing to me. You lost Ings, you're selling Vestergaard. What's happening? So, and I think Hassan Hutel, there's kind of like a false narrative around him that he's this great coach. I haven't seen it that way. That's not how I see it. That team is quite weak, in my opinion, and I think they're lucky to have finished where they did last season. So I have them going down as well. They're a team that I don't think they're going to be able to stay up. But that's me. I think that's all we're supposed to go through. Yep, bottom three, top four, and champions. Now it's David's turn. What you got for me?
Okay.
Tom?
Well, I went for Man City as the champions. And I'll be even more convinced by that prediction if they get Harry Kane. Because if you think about the goals and the assists that he brings, I just can't see how City would lose the league with Harry Kane in that side now that they've added Grealish to just the sheer talent that they've got there. And you have to also remember that last season City were defensively just ruthless, with Diaz there, who was superb, and that partnership with John Stones, the fullbacks, Ederson in goal, who's one of the best 2-3 goalies in the world for me. So City have, fixed a problem that they had the season before in their defence. And if they, having lost Aguero, if they add Kane, I think I can't see anybody beating them. In saying that, though, I would say that Chelsea will push them all the way for me. That could go down to the last 3 or 4 games of the season with Lukaku there now. I think he'll score a number of goals for Chelsea. And again, much like City in that number 9 position, Chelsea have filled that problem. They've fixed that problem, that issue in the side. Liverpool, I've put Liverpool at third because I think they'll be better this season than they were last season. I think they're banking on players being fit, and I think we'll probably see a bit of rotation from Klopp. I can't see Gomez and Van Dijk playing, 5 out of the first 6 games. I think he's going to rotate them and, ease them in back into the side. Another player that I think could be very important for Liverpool this season is Diogo Jota, who I think started his Liverpool career so well, and then much like other players in the team, got injured and was ruled out for I think it was 10 to 12 weeks out of the side. So he lost all that momentum that he had built up having joined from Wolves. So I think he's somebody who's going to push that front three. They've got a player there who they know can score goals and who they know that Klopp likes and can start games, which would mean that one of the three would drop to the bench. So he's definitely going to keep that front three on their toes. Man United, I think Man United have had a good window, as we've said, but without a good, strong central midfield, I can't see them challenging for the league. I just think that will be too much for them, really. Leicester, again, sad to say, I think they might just miss out on the top 4. But I think they've had an excellent summer. Just very, very sad, just quickly, if I can, the injury that Wesley Fofana suffered in that pre-season friendly. It was a horrific tackle. And it looks like he'll be out for a long time. So, yeah, but they're signing Vestergaard, who's a very experienced Premier League player, but I think they might just miss out on the top 4. So that's my top 4.
I don't see Arsenal in 8th. We'll let that go. We'll leave that for the WhatsApp chat.
Just
we'll leave
scroll down.
Oh, well, now who's at the bottom for you?
A couple similar to you, Watford and Norwich. Yeah, I think both of those teams will struggle. I can't see them staying up, despite Watford have had a few years of experience in the Premier League, and they've got for me one of an excellent goalkeeper who will I think coming in and out of the team, and Ben Foster, someone who has that experience. A few of the other players in that squad have played Premier League football as well, but I just think it'll be too much for them. I think there are a few other teams that are much better than them. And Norwich as well, having lost Buendia, who I think is a big one, and if Cantwell also goes to Aston Villa, that's 2 really creative sparks gone from the side. I will say it's exciting that they've got Billy Gilmore on loan for the season. I think he's someone that I'll be very interested to see how he does playing. He'll start games for Norwich, and I think that's probably part of the agreement that Chelsea have put in place to allow him to go there. So it'll be very interesting to see him there, building his experience, playing week in, week out. But yeah, again, with Norwich, I just don't see them having enough to stay up. And I've finally gone for Newcastle. I think, they struggled last season. And I just don't know if Steve Bruce has had enough, support, and they've not signed enough players to stay in the Premier League. I think this year it might be the year that Newcastle actually go down. I think they've signed a kid from Liverpool, Remy Savage. They've signed a chap called Cameron Ferguson and Charlie Wiggett from Chelsea, another academy player. But I mean, that's not enough to stay in the Premier League. So
they're on the verge of signing Willock as well. But I get what you're saying. That's not.
But enough. I think someone like Callum Wilson up front, who gets the occasional hamstring injury. I mean, he's their main threat, really, along with St. Maximin. But it's an over reliance on those two, and I just think that they might not have enough to stay in the league this season.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good shout. You just look at Newcastle and you're just like, what is going to happen there? I think just not getting the takeover that they wanted has just kind of left them wanting, so it's rough, but yeah, I think Norwich and Watford for me are certain. And then there'll be somebody else in there that's probably been there for a while. I think I have Brentford at 17th as well. I think they barely escape. I know people who think they're going to be mid-table or even European spaces. And I'm just like, if Leeds didn't get that, I don't think Brentford will. But
in your first season in the Premier League, all you really want is to finish 17th, ultimately.
Right.
No matter who you sign, you just want to stay up and build on that. But I think they've got an excellent coach. They almost they missed out on the Premier League before in the playoffs. But I think Frank is a great coach, and I think they've got a very good squad. I think they'll play some very attractive football, and I think they'll have enough to stay up.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about young players to watch. We have 4, and let's start with the best of them all. Let's start with Emile Smith-Rowe. I mean, I just love this kid so much, obviously. So, got the number 10 shirt over the summer with a new contract. Do you think that's too much pressure on Emil, or you think he can handle it?
I think from what we saw last season, I think he can handle it. He seems very grounded. Had a great season last season. I think he started 20 games in the Premier League. He got a couple of goals, 5 assists. But more than that, you saw a player that Arsenal wanted. They wanted to pass the ball to him. They were very confident in his ability. His touch on the ball is excellent, and the way that he creates space and chances for the rest of the team. I think Arsenal's best business this summer was getting him to sign a long-term contract along with Bukayo Saka. And I think if those two have a good season for Arsenal, then I think Arteta can get that side into those European places. But yeah, Emil Smith Rowe's a great player. I just think he's also got that flexibility as well. He can play, as the number 10, as his shirt suggests, but he can also play off the flank if Aubameyang plays up front. And, in the way that Jack Grealish was doing for Aston Villa, without trying to, say that these players are, copycats of one another, but he's somebody that I think can play off that flank and cut inside and, create space that way. So very excited to see what he does this season. And, I'm sure he'll be pushing for a place in the England squad.
Yeah, Southgate has mentioned him already, which I love because that means that he's on his radar. And I mean, is a player that Arsenal heavily rely on, which I think is bad, but it also kind of shows the levels that he's at. I know it's hard to see it because he's not the finished product yet, but he has a very high ceiling if he can stay injury free, which has been one of his issues. He tends to get a couple of injuries here and there, but high hopes for the kid. Think he's going to be great. Let's talk about Patson Daka for Leicester. This is a player that I feel has had like a lot of hype around him coming from the Austrian league. It's not a great league, but he still had tons of goals in that league for Salzburg, I believe. And when I was watching him for Leicester in their preseason matches, he looked really sharp. And again, he's the type of player that's really hard to defend against because it's power and pace, but it's not just with lack of quality or technical quality. He has that as well. And good pickup for Leicester. Good Vardy, successor, in my opinion, because Vardy's getting a little on in age. What do you think about Patson Daka? Do you think he'll get minutes, or do you think he'll still be kind of behind Vardy in the pecking order?
I'm very excited about Patson Daka. I think he's only 22. As you say, he's come from Salzburg, but from that production line that produced the likes of Sadio Mane, Erling Haaland. So their scouts there have got a real good eye for promising players, and I just think he's very, very exciting. And Leicester have done very well to sign him, but I think it just ultimately reflects well on the business that Leicester have been doing in the last few years. I think their transfer business, they've just signed so many wonderful players. If you think the likes of Tillemans has come in, Iheanacho from Manchester City, nobody really thought anything about him, but he showed last year what a great player he can be for Leicester City, and really led the line well when Vardy was not scoring those goals. They signed they signed a few others. They've signed Samare, who I think is a very exciting player. Fofana, Soyuncu. Leicester have signed some very good players in the last few years, and I think Patson Daka is just another one of those that, I think he'll score a lot of goals for Leicester. Maybe not right away, because I can see Brendan Rodgers still starting with Vardy and Iheanacho, but I'm sure he'll be a real impact player. And again, another one who can play anywhere across the front line. He can play off the left, off the right, as the lone forward. He's done that for Salzburg before. So I think it's a great signing for Rodgers, and somebody that is just going to get goals for Leicester.
Yeah, very exciting player. I'm excited to watch him play because I think he's really good, to be honest. But let's talk about Michael Elise for Crystal Palace. I think this is a really good pickup, especially because Eze is injured. They need somebody creative in there. Still a young player, but Crystal Palace has done some good business, and I think this is one of the best pickups that they've had. Tell me a little bit about Michael Elise.
Yeah, I mean, another one. If you cast your eye back to last season and the business that Palace did in signing Eberechi Eze from QPR, and he was just superb for Crystal Palace. So comfortable in the Premier League for someone so young. it was just so unfortunate that he got that Achilles injury towards the end of last season that has obviously ruled him out at the start of this season. But yeah, Palace have done the same thing again. They've gone for the Championship Young Player of the Season last year, and Elise he scored 7 goals, 12 assists for Reading, and he's just got a wonderful maturity about his play, an excellent first touch, and someone that I think is really going to fill that Eze void until Eze comes back, and then really that's terrifying to think of those two along with Zaha, Mateta up front, who I'm sure that Patrick Vieira will be hoping for goals from. So yeah, very excited about this kid, and I think he's got a very bright future.
Yeah, I'm excited about this kind of new look Crystal Palace side in general. I think we have to be careful about putting too many expectations, on them because it's still a young squad, but I think they're doing the right things to bring in the right type of players for their profile. So I like it. I'm excited about that as well. And I'll just let you take Harvey Elliott just from the beginning. You should know a lot about this guy. And I don't really know a lot about him. The new haircut, I could have sworn he had like a bun or something before, didn't he? So that's what he was kind of known for in my mind.
He's thankfully cut that off and gone for a much better look. But no, he's a very, very promising player. Was out on loan last season at Blackburn in the Championship and scored 7 goals. Made 41 appearances. I think he started 30 of those games. So really got a great grounding at Blackburn, and he's had a superb pre-season. Klopp has been using him in this in the number 10 role with Salah and Mane either side of him. And you think of even in pre-season, it's a lot of responsibility for Harvey Elliott to be playing ahead of somebody like Oxlade-Chamberlain, ahead of somebody like Takumi Minamino, ahead of somebody even like another youngster that Liverpool have got on their books, Curtis Jones. Elliott has been the one that has started all these games and has been very, very impressive for Liverpool. And I think possibly, it looks like they're going to be losing Shaqiri. And if Liverpool don't sign anybody, a lot of that will be to do with the fact that Harvey Elliott has looked very, very good. And I'm sure that they really trust that he can be a backup option for that front three. And I also think that he's somebody that they will, they'll have to rely on in January when Salah and Mane go off to the African Cup of Nations. So I'm very excited to see this kid get minutes for Liverpool this season. I think he's going to have a very promising future at Anfield.
If no, like I've never really seen him play. So could you tell me like what are his 3 best attributes? Like what makes him a special player?
He's got an excellent first touch. And on top of that, his weight of pass is just it's splendid, really, the way he's able to just, pass a ball and put it in with the right amount of power that is right there for the player that he's passing to. And his one-touch passing is superb as well. And if you think about the combination play that Liverpool like to use to, attack and, create space for the likes of Salah, Mane, Firmino to run into, he's very good at spotting that pass as he's receiving the ball, already getting it off straight away, as opposed to, feeling the need to take one touch, maybe another touch. And, sometimes a player can then lose the ball. But his ability to just get a pass off immediately and, get Liverpool on the attack is something that is so impressive and, beyond the age, beyond his years. He's only 18. And to be able to play like that at 18 is, it's very, very impressive.
Yeah, it's interesting just because I feel most of the time like Chelsea young players, Arsenal young players, Manchester United young players get a lot of praise, but I don't think Liverpool's youth players get enough, because we don't know a lot about like Curtis Jones. He often gets overlooked, and Harvey Elliott is somebody that I've never really heard people really talk about, besides like, Liverpool fans. So it's interesting. I'm interested to see him play, see if he gets some playing time. Probably maybe in a early cup games or something, or maybe he starts first game of the season. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting to see how he plays.
You only have to hear just one more thing, and you only have to listen back to the way Scott Parker spoke when Elliott decided to reject a new contract with Fulham and join Liverpool, and Parker was devastated with that, because I think he would have played a lot of games for Fulham in the season that they went down, and who knows what could have happened then, really. So you could see that Fulham were devastated to lose this kid. He's a really, really impressive player, and actually it looks like he's on the verge of an under-21 call-up. And when you think about, the players like Emile Smith-Rowe, the players that England have in that position, for somebody, in the age bracket below to be pushing for a spot in the under 21 squad speaks volumes about how he's seen in the English game. So yeah, it's very promising, and it would not surprise me, given how his pre-season has gone, if he actually starts that game against Norwich on Saturday.
So interesting. It's going to be such an exciting season. I honestly can't wait. I mean, I can a little bit just because like Arsenal haven't really done that much in the transfer window, but I'm always excited for the new season. It's always exciting. But that's it for me. My name is Jessica. You can follow me on Twitter at @itchjessinho. And thank you to David, who you can find on Twitter at David Gerges SNTV, which is different than before. We're just switching up our names now. Loving that. You don't want your age on there anymore, you said, right?
No, definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, as we get older, we don't really want people reminding us of it, do we?
No, quite.
Thank you to everyone who's joining us today. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. This is the WeShow Football YouTube channel, the official one, so make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss another show. Hope to see you guys again soon, and yeah, we'll talk to you later. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.